Thanks for having me. I hope you can all hear me at the back. Can you hear me at the back? Good. I'll try not to use the mic if I don't have to. But yeah, thanks for stealing my whole intro. I appreciate that. Like I said, I obviously had one of the more interesting football careers, I suppose. Per capita or per game, I probably had the most media attention of just about anyone, which is one of the interesting parts of sort of my story. But today I'll sort of cover a little bit about my sort of background, where I grew up, a little bit of my sporting stuff, a bit of my footy stuff, and then I'll just sort of touch on the mental health side of my career and sort of my experiences with it. It's probably one of the biggest societal issues we're facing at the moment, not to exclude you girls, but especially in young men. It's definitely something that seems to be at least more isolated or more prevalent in terms of the conversation, and I'm just trying to push forward a really positive message around obviously the challenges that some people face, especially the challenges that I faced, but equally the ability for us to overcome it and for us to get something really positive out of it. So for my background, I was born in 1995, 22nd of August. I'm a kid from the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, probably a similar distance from the city as you guys, out in Ringwood. Grew up from a young age absolutely captivated by sport. I played footy, tennis, basketball, cricket, surfing, swimming, just about everything I could get myself into, and it's still a significant part of my life to this day. So I sort of had a massive growth spurt when I was young. I sort of had 27 centimetres, grew in prep, so I was basically the biggest in primary school from grade 1 all the way through to grade 6, and that sort of led me to being one of the more significant sportsmen sort of in my area, and sort of led me to representing my leagues, the state, and then obviously being selected to play in the AIS and then get drafted in 2013. So throughout that whole period, I was also obviously doing school, much like you guys are now, and I put a sort of a real significant credence on my schooling and was able to achieve a 93 ATAR, dedicated a lot of my time, a lot of my effort to my schooling to make sure that I had a backup plan of sorts. And as I went through my teenage years, basically as I turned 15, I started getting quite a bit of media attention. I was sort of starting to get touted as a high draft pick, and in Victoria in particular, and to a lesser degree in SA and WA, footy is the talk of the town, as I'm sure all of you know. And that sort of started impacting my life slowly but surely. I started getting scouts at every one of my games, started getting criticised both online and in the media if I didn't have quite as good a game, and slowly but surely my accepted level of performance grew and grew as I played more and more good footy as a junior footballer. At the end of 2013, I was drafted pick 1 by the GWS Giants, and 10 days after my final exam, which I think was my physics exam, I moved to Sydney. So on that Monday, I started my new career, started my new vocation as a professional footballer. I was living in a foreign state that I'd barely spent any time before. I was living in a new apartment with 2 blokes I didn't know, and I was starting a fully new profession as an athlete, as an AFL player. And now one of the big shifts that happens when you go from playing as a junior to going to play as a senior is that there's this inherent competitiveness in the environment. And when you're a professional player, everyone is there and have some sort of survival method, because obviously at the end of every year, probably 10 or so players from every list, so it's a quarter of the list, get cut and either moved on to another club or they get delisted and their career ends. So what that leads to is this real sort of dog-eat-dog world where everyone's trying to climb over the top of each other to reach the best heights in their team and sort of become the best players they can. And at the Giants, because there was all draft picks and they were all high draft picks like myself, there was this was extenuated into a really magnified version of the AFL environment. So this was really challenging for me because I'd grown up, being a good teammate, really valued, being professional, getting involved in meetings, good friends, loved the camaraderie of sport, rarely played many individual sports because of the team inside of team sports. And then all of a sudden I was being challenged every day by my teammates, my coaches, the executives, and pushed along and trying to accelerate your growth as a player. And it really didn't give you any credence to play, to do your bit during the week. The sort of the training and all that other stuff I spoke about, being professional, didn't count for anything if you didn't play well on the weekend. So that was a really difficult thing for me to consider. And during this time, I started having my first issues with mental health. I started having issues with sleep, started having issues with anxiety. And there's a buzzword in the AFL environment that they use to sort of encapsulate all the issues that young players have. And that word they use is homesickness. They use words like this in society as well. It's sort of an umbrella term to sort of categorise issues that young people have. And now the danger of that is, for me, being a young person, I considered the fact that homesickness was everything that was going wrong in my life. I was, having real issues falling asleep. Most games, I would sort of start getting anxious a couple of days before, and I'd start having real bad sort of, the cycle, the loop of the game coming up that, you're trying to consider what's going to happen next, and it was sort of starting to get quite exhausting. But I literally considered all of that stuff just to be homesickness. I thought it was normal, and I thought that, everyone around me was going through the exact same thing. So to solve this problem, being a logical person, I was like, homesickness, I'll move home. So at the end of 2014, I moved back to Melbourne to play for the Western Bulldogs in the biggest deal that had been offered to any player ever at that time, 7 years and $7 million. Now, I thought this was going to solve all my issues. I was like, I'm back home, I'm around my family and friends, I've got a great deal, I've got a beautiful girlfriend, I've got a new puppy, I'm living by myself, it's great, all things are well. And, for a while, things were better. I'd convinced myself of this story, and, the stories we tell ourselves are obviously very important and they're very powerful. So, we went through 2016, I started having a few more issues, but we were playing such good footy that it didn't matter. And, we were achieving things that no one had ever seen before. It's been 62 years since the Bulldogs had won their last flag. And for the most part, the whole of Australia was pushing us forward, and for at least that 4 weeks in September, they were all behind us. So that was one of the greatest periods of my life. Truly exciting. I have some of the best memories. I have lifelong relationships with, dozens of people that are involved in the footy club at the time. The fans still to this day thank me and all of my teammates. I still get all the grannies coming up to me saying, I'm so glad I saw that before I died. It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest. But throughout 2017, it was evident that sort of success and that happiness sort of covered up a lot of the stuff that I was having issues with. So during 2017, towards the end of the season, I took time off, citing mental health reasons, including depression and anxiety. Bit of a shock to the media, obviously, a bit of shock to a lot of people, considering that, I was a healthy, or at least physically, young man who was playing what was considered the best job in the world. I was one of the best paid players in the league, and I'd just come off the back of a premiership, and the world was my oyster. I was only 22 years old. Now, what led to me taking time off was that I had a really bad bout of insomnia. So I had about 6 weeks where I didn't sleep at all. And one of the methods of treatment when you have insomnia is that they literally grab a chair, a desk chair, like similar to what you're sitting on now, they put it next to your bed, and they say, sit in the chair, wait till you doze off, and when you start dozing off, get into bed and try and fall asleep. And if it doesn't work, get back out of bed, go sit in the chair, try it again. And you just continue to do this. Now, this method is essentially trying to bore your brain to sleep. And it's extremely mind-numbing. It is one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do in my life. And what occurred after all this insomnia and the lack of sleep was that my body started breaking down. So I started having issues with sickness and health and calf injury, a back injury here. My shoulder was starting to go bad again, simply because your body can't operate on no sleep. So I took time off. And I spent time with my girlfriend, and I went down the beach, I kept training, I kept seeing the psych, which I'd been seeing throughout 2017, and I just started putting all these things in my life that gave me a sense of fulfillment, a sense of structure, and I took out that one thing, which was football at the time, that was causing me all this drama. So since then, I returned to play footy at the end of 2017. I played all of last year, and halfway through this year I decided to retire and walked away from 2.5 years of service and over $2 million still worth of paid salary. Now, it might seem dramatic, to be honest, the media speculation or the media sort of narrative around me retiring has been a lot based on mental health, and I can understand the reason they would go down that path. But to be totally honest with you, my choice to retire from AFL football simply was because I didn't want to do it anymore, and I'm more interested in doing other things in life, things like speaking to you guys, things like continuing my business degree, I got engaged recently, and I'm looking forward to sort of the next part of my life. So whilst I would say that, mental health has been a significant part of my life and it's been a really challenging period, it's also taught me a lot of things, and I'll sort of reiterate a couple of the things that I've learnt to you now. So one of the common misconceptions or one of the common misunderstood areas of mental health is anxiety, right? So it's something that everyone goes through to a degree, and it's extremely normal to a part to go through anxiety. Now, the challenging thing with anxiety is that what it makes you do is that once you want to withdraw from the thing that makes you anxious. So you see, whether it be like me coming here today, I've got a speech to do, I'm anxious, I don't want to do it. But the problem is, if you take yourself away from the things that make you anxious, over time, your capacity to deal with things that are stressful decreases. So suddenly, for a literal example, speaking in front of 150 people like today, suddenly 50 people is daunting, then 20 and 30, and speaking to one person is daunting until, eventually, doom and gloom, not being able to go outside. That's sort of the general rule around anxiety. But the flip side of it, and the really positive side of it, is that if you choose and if you are able to get yourself over those anxious moments, then all of a sudden you grow your capacity. So then likewise, the reverse of that equation would be the speaking to 10, to speaking to 50, to speaking to 1,000. And that's where we unlock some of the most important parts of our character, because this is how we sort of develop, and incrementally, like weight training over time, we're able to deal with more and more stuff and more stress. And that's that whole growing and maturing. And that's the understanding that we have to a degree, tolerate some of these stressful moments so that we can get to something better and greater in our lives. And likewise to that, two things that go hand in hand, obviously, is our general well-being. Now, general well-being is sort of a bit of a general term about health and happiness and things in your life that are fulfilling. And the reason why that's so important is so that we can do this stuff. We can deal with the anxiety because we've got a good sense of general well-being. So things that work for me and things that I've always passed on to people are, things like spending time with family and friends, connecting with the people around us. For me, it's always been surfing or, swimming or something in nature, photography, spending time with my girlfriend, walking my dog, all easy things that we consider part of our lives that, we don't have to do if we don't want to. But for me, it's something that I have to do consistently to make sure that I get quality sleep, that I'm quality relationships, that I'm always connected with people. And that's how I sort of build up my well of wellness. So the importance of that is that our general well-being actually operates basically as our ability to deal with adverse moments in our life. When stressful moments come along, if we're in a good place, we're much more capable of dealing with that stuff. And this is the sort of thing that we all need to monitor within ourselves, and this is the stuff that we need to help monitor within others and support our friends, support our classmates, as you guys no doubtedly do, so that when things do go wrong, we can all deal with it either as an individual or together. Now, like I said earlier, I really truly think that this is one of the biggest issues we're facing in society because of the changes we've had. There's obviously issues with social media. They obviously played a significant role in my journey with mental health. And, as young people and people who are connected via the internet and via your phones all the time, something that's extremely challenging. And the only advice I would give to you, because I truly don't understand the sort of magnitude of the issue of social media, and I don't think anyone does, but the only advice I would give to you is that operate on those platforms as though you're talking to the people directly, and that vice versa. So any criticism you get, any adulation you get, it's only as real as if you are talking to the person. So it's not like when you get a message on your phone, they're not sitting in the room with you. You're not in an elevator, you're not talking to them in person, and you can't give the same amount of credence to what they're saying, both good or bad, as you would if you're actually talking to them in general. And that's, like I said, on the flip side of that, we should all operate as though with the same sort of respect and care that we would in general conversation or with people in direct contact. So, to leave you with a few things. First of all, I'd just like to reiterate that this is something that we all go through. It's extremely normal. Every single person in this room, every single person you've ever met is dealing with mental health on some degree. And there's a spectrum and a scale of what we go through at different times in our lives. we should all try and support each other through the bad times, as well as trying to, capitalise, I suppose, on the good times. Anxiety is a normal part of life. It's something that we all go through. And it's something that if we can overcome and we can find a way through support from others, and that might be from a professional or from our classmates, to deal with these anxious moments and complete those tasks that make us stressed and anxious, we can actually unlock some of our most exciting potential. And general well-being is just a disciplined approach to your life. So that means sticking to the task and finding the things over time that help you deal with stress and help you deal with adverse moments in your life. Because for me, this has been one of the most, difficult, but also one of the most thought-provoking and most important parts of my life, to find out who I am and to find out what works for me and to find out how I can deal with some of the most difficult things that I've had to go through. And they'll also hold me into good stead into the rest of my life. So thank you all for having me. I'm happy to answer absolutely any questions you might have. Trust me, I've had some of the weirdest ones and some of the worst ones that you could possibly imagine, so don't feel scared or afraid. But I wish you all nothing but health and happiness, and I wish you all the best, and thanks again for having me. Cheers.